In today's show, we're talking shooting guards with Matt Smith. Michael Bolton.
Thanks, Josh. It's Michael Bolton here, and it's time for another episode of the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast. Let's get to it.
Let's get to it, indeed.
You are Locked On Fantasy Basketball, your daily fantasy basketball podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast, brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd and I am the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com and at Yahoo Sports Australia. And you can find me on Twitter, as always, at redrock_bball and on Instagram at Locked On Fantasy Basketball. Thank you for making Locked On Fantasy Basketball your first listen every day. We are free and we are available on all platforms. Yesterday, we did a show. Today, I don't even know. The show before this one, it was about point guards and we're putting them into tiers. If you want to hear our description of what we're talking about with tiers, go back to the start of that show and give it a watch. We're going to talk about shooting guards today. So a lot of the players that weren't on the point guards tier show are going to be in this show. And when I say we, of course, I'm referring to the one and only Matt Smith. Matt, welcome back.
Thank you, Josh.
Good to have you back on. It's been so long since we spoke, about 30 seconds. You're here, ready to go. We're going to talk shooting guards. Again, most of the positional crossover is point guard, shooting guard. So the guys that aren't here were on yesterday's show. There's a couple of guys who we aren't going to include on this. We're going to put into the small forwards. That's guys like Gordon Hayward, guys like Mikal Bridges, who's listed as a shooting guard / small forward over on Yahoo. Desmond Bain we're going to have in the small forward grouping as well. They're probably the major ones, Matt, I think. OG Anunoby, Buddy Hield, yep.
Buddy Hield is probably the other one. Him and Chris Duarte can sort of transition between the two, but for the sake of the exercise, that's what we've done.
Yep, so it's you have to make a cut-off with some of these guys. We've got Lou Dort in the small forwards as well. We've got Caleb Martin in that group. Just going through Bogdan Bogdanovic, who I said as well. Herb Jones is going to be in the small forward group along with Buddy Hield and Anunoby. And DeMar DeRozan, of course, is exclusively a forward at this point in his career. So he is listed that way on Yahoo now as well. So maybe I won't get into as many arguments with people who tell me that he's a guard. All right, Matt, we're going to talk about these tiers. We've given the description already in the previous show. Let's look at Tier 1. And you will note in Tier 1, there's probably not a first-round guy. We're not including Doncic. We're not including Harden. They were point guards. There's probably not a first-round player here.
No, there's definitely not a first-round player, and it's probably not even the top 15 player. It's Devin Booker and it's Dejounte Murray, and to me, they're both sort of back end of the second-round guys. I know that sounds early for Devin Booker, and even I'm trying to sort of work out where I'm going to take Devin Booker if I do, and if I get that sort of maybe 16, 17, 18 range. But, the points are elite. The free throw efficiency is there. 5 or 6 assists from the shooting guard slot is really handy. So he feels kind of safe when we're talking about, your Anthony Davis and your Kawhi and your Paul George and Kyrie Irving. So Devin Booker provides a little bit of safety, well, at least in my mind, at least. And then Dejounte Murray, he'll take a drop in value from last season as he shares the ball with Trae Young and, won't be able to just crush the boards like he did with Capella and John Collins there as well. But I think he's probably still the back end of the second round and somewhere between maybe 18 and 24.
Yeah, see, I'm not even sure I'd have these two together. I think Booker, to me, baseline is around 20. But we talked yesterday or in the previous show about Chris Paul's age. If Paul misses, then Devin Booker is like a top 12, top 14 player because the 5 assists go to 6.5, the scoring jumps. And we saw it down the stretch last season with Chris Paul was out. Booker was putting up, I think, top 11 numbers in that situation. So I think there is a real upside there if Paul misses more time. If Paul suffers multiple long-term injuries and misses 30 games, 40 games, then Booker is better than this. Murray would need a few other things to happen there, and the likelihood of Chris Paul getting injured at 37 versus Trae Young at 24 is a little bit higher for Chris Paul as well. I would have Murray probably pushed more down into tier 2 because I'd comfortably take Booker in the second round, and I'm not sure I would with Murray. I know people are going to say, well, the things that Murray does well doesn't get impacted by Trae, but I don't think that's true, really, because again, he had one season of being this level of player, one season of averaging 2 steals per game. There's no guarantee it's going to happen again. The rebounds, as you mentioned, Collins and Capella, they're not Jakob Poeltl and Doug McDermott, like they are two much better rebounders than those guys. So he might have fewer opportunities there, fewer assists, and there's no guarantee the steals, which are the most volatile stat year on year, that they stick at that number either. So I'd be pretty... and his numbers have been all over the shop. He was pre-ranked 11th, then 28th, and I think he's back to 15th, and at 15th, I want nothing to do with him.
Yeah, exactly. Like I said, probably a back end of second round. But I completely understand when we get to tier two guys who, particularly in some of the mock drafts and some of the videos that I've seen, there's one guy in particular who's sneaking into the top 20.
Yeah, he is, and that's Anthony Edwards. Tier 2, we've got him and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. He's going around 20 to 24 in most drafts that I've seen. I reckon it's probably marginally too high, and you're banking on some improvement, which could easily come. It might not. I'd feel better with him around the 27 to 30 mark. Would I feel more confident with Edwards with an upward trajectory versus Murray with a downward trajectory? Probably. But yeah, there is an element of risk of going a little bit too high on Edwards, of people going inside the top 20, I think.
There is, and I'm again still trying to justify where I'm taking these guys. Like, I do have some injury concerns and the shutdown concerns around Shai. And yes, Josh, I know he was the third ranked player in fantasy playoffs last year. Yes, thank you. But I just have concerns again. What's going to happen to the Thunder come March and April? And Edwards, I think he's really being hyped up and like I said, flying into the top 20, which slightly too early for me, but. And then if you want to, go back to point guard tiers, and this is probably the range where you've got your Fred VanVleet and your Cade Cunningham as well. Like, do you prefer Cade over Anthony Edwards, for instance?
I took him in a mock draft. I don't know if I was ahead of Edwards, but I probably would. I just like those assists that Cade is bringing. It is a tough one. Like, Edwards, like, we could be sitting here next year and saying, well, Anthony Edwards, man, he was great. He was the 10th best player. And it wouldn't shock me in the slightest. Like, if he averaged 27, 5, and 5, that is absolutely possible. I don't want to bank on it, but it is possible. The Shai one is interesting because you're right. He was the third ranked player, Matt, in fantasy players. Thanks for bringing that up for me. But that doesn't eliminate all concern, right? My thing is that people go, I'm never drafting a Thunder player. I'm just not touching, which I think is a ridiculous mindset to have. But you do have to couch some of that value. And now the thing with Shai is that he actually struggled quite a bit with some of his shooting numbers last season. And so there's actually room for him to improve on a per-game basis from where he was. I think he shot 30% from three last year and had some real trouble there. And if that bumps back up at all, then he might be the 15th best player per game. That's completely possible. But there is a risk of injury. But you've also got to start to think that at what point is Shai, who legitimately had injury, the first year of that tank, he had an injury. He didn't play all summer. Couldn't play for Canada because he had an injury. And this season he had an injury. He came back and then he missed the last couple of weeks with that injury, which I think was a little bit of bullshit as well. There's got to be a point also where I think that he's going to be, I'm not happy just playing 40 games a year. And I think that's, if they weren't legitimate injury, which again, the first one definitely was, and the second one he came back from, and then we sat down the last 2 weeks. I think there is a chance that he actually pushes through 65 games this year.
And I think when we're talking about games played, like, going back maybe 4, 5, 6 years ago, like 75 games was probably that benchmark where we wanted our top guys to get to. I think now it's like 70.
Yep.
Like if they miss 10 to 12 games, I think that's a good result. If a player's missing or only playing like 60 to 65, and, we're talking about Kawhi, Paul George, maybe Joel Embiid, like these guys, LeBron James, like, to me, like that's, and maybe Shai, like you said, depending on where he sits in that range, like that's the concern. Like the guys I draft in the top 2 rounds, I really want to get 70 plus games out of them this season. So it's really difficult to find and to weigh up that per game value versus total value. It's a really interesting sort of point in the draft. And if you've got a top 5 pick and you're taking, Jokic, Embiid, Giannis, Luka, whoever it might be, and then in the back of the second, and you've got guys like Cade or Anthony Edwards or Shai or maybe Dejounte Murray, like that just looks like a really great spot of the draft to get a top 5 player and then back it up with 2 of these guys to form a solid 3.
Yeah, I like the top of the draft. I like the back end of the draft. I just don't like the middle of the draft this year. That's sort of been my experience so far. We'll get into tier 3 in a second, Matt. Before we do that, I'm going to tell you guys about Built Bar because it's got a new flavor. And if you haven't tasted it, I don't know what you're doing because it is unbelievable. Cookie dough chunk. Delicious, chewy puff texture, covered in 100% real chocolate with real cookie dough chunks. If you don't have the time to make cookie dough, whatever the hell that is, then you get these because they taste great. They're low in calories, they're low in fat, they're low in sugar, but they're high in protein. There's 15 grams of protein in a bar, 160 calories. Why don't you just snag a box? Snag doesn't feel like it's an American word here. It feels like that's very Australian, but I'm reading that directly off this copy. You got to snag a box for you and your family. It'd be the perfect treat. You can find a really good hiding place or just hoard them for yourself. So, head to Built.com and get the cookie dough chunk puff, get the other flavors, get your Built bars, get your Built puffs, and get them for 15% off by using the code LOCKEDON15. That's LOCKEDON15. That saves you 15% off your order. Built Bar is, like Matt, built different. Matt, tier 3 shooting guards. Brad Beal, Donovan Mitchell. Bradley Beal was shithouse before he got injured last season. Donovan Mitchell moves to a new situation. Beal is sliding a little bit in drafts. He was going regularly at the top of the second round last season, but he really struggled. He couldn't really do much, and I'm not sure how it's going to go. We haven't seen a single second with him playing next to Kristaps Porzingis. I think he probably has a higher upside here than Mitchell, to be honest. Mitchell's had one season inside the top 40, and that was last year. Now he moves to a less favorable scenario, and the reason really he jumped up was a big increase in steals. I would probably prioritize Beal over Mitchell, I think.
Ooh, okay, interesting. And then on the flip side, like Beal struggled last year because of his dramatic drop-off in field goal percentage and three-point efficiency and therefore points per game. So I reckon Bradley Beal's at a really nice discount this year. Like you said, he was going sort of in that 12 to 15 range, and a lot of people got burnt. And then now we're getting him at, the 3rd or 4th round, and people are like, I drafted Beal last year. Like, I'm not going to draft him in the top 50 again. And then, it wouldn't surprise me if Bradley Beal jumps back as a top 25 player, maybe.
Yeah, easily.
And the same, does Donovan Mitchell have that in him? Probably not, particularly on a loaded Cavs team. So, but yeah, 2 really nice picks here in this 3rd round. And Josh, you owe me about 14 boxes of Built Bar, so I look forward to the truck turning up one day.
I got a delivery about 10 boxes here not the other day, it was about 6 months ago. But man, it cost so much to get them shipped out here. I'll get you some over there, Matt. Next time I'm in Adelaide, I'll drop you a Built Bar.
Sounds good.
Yeah, so they're interesting players. I think the thing with them is they give decent assists from a shooting guard spot, and I think I'd give Beal the edge. I just think he gets more. Morris is not necessarily a high assist sort of a player, high run the offense sort of a player. He's like, get the ball to someone and get out of the way, then let them do their thing, whereas Garland's a little bit different to that alongside Mitchell. Tier 4 is really intriguing. I did a mock today. Zach Levine fell a lot. I think people were panicked because on Yahoo he's got the injury designation, INJ is next to his name, and he fell outside the top 50, which was staggering to me. I know he had some arthroscopic surgery in the offseason. From what I understand, he's ready to go. There's no problem. He's fine. He's going to do what he did. He was a bit down last season. The knee bothered him towards the end of the year. But I think he's absolutely rock solid here, whereas Rozier is, again, being undervalued pretty considerably by probably 1 or 2 rounds, but based on rank and value. Last season, he was a top 50 player. There's no reason that he won't do that again. His value does get inflated by low turnovers, which I think really skews values of players, but still, he's in this spot. There's no Miles Bridges, we assume, for the whole season, and he's their backup point guard as well as their starting shooting guard. There's a ton of value in Rozier.
I really like him. When I started to sit down and go through the tiers and look at values, and I'm looking at Terry Rozier, and going back a few years ago, I didn't want anything to do with him because he was just basically would kill your field goal percentage. But now you look at a guy who can get you, pretty close to 25 and 5, close to 3 threes a game, over a steal per game. His his field goal percentage is back into the mid 40s. And we can get him in maybe the 4th or potentially 5th round. Yes, please. No Miles Bridges, like you said. Lonzo Ball isn't the biggest scorer. Gordon Hayward can't stay healthy. So, yeah, Terry Rozier is really juicy in this range. And Zach Levine, yes, he's not injured at the moment, but he hasn't played any more than 63 games over the past 5 seasons. So he's another guy who I'm sort of putting in that 60 to 65 game range. So you're going to have to expect him to miss time throughout the season. It's just how much. But on a per game value, like he was I think about the 15th ranked player last year in 8 category leagues. So the per game value was great. Total value not so good.
I think Levine might have been that 2 years ago. Last year he wasn't. He was like 30. Oh no, what was he? No, 37th last season. It was 2 years ago that he was up that high before DeRozan arrived. He did cop a bit of a bump. We thought he'd maintain the number 1 role. He didn't. DeRozan took that number 1 role. On tier 5 is a really interesting tier. This is probably in that 50 to 65 range of a draft. We've got Jaylen Brown, Jalen Green, Devin Vassell. I'm sure his middle name's Jalen as well. Brown suffers a little bit from being a guy who scores, and then I'm not sure what else. Like everything else is sort of okay. It's average, like average assists, average rebounds, average steals, average threes. Like everything is pretty average, and then a below average free throw percentage. So while he appears to be a sexy name, we know how well he played in the NBA Finals. His fantasy game's not as well rounded as what you may anticipate when you see someone scoring 24 points per game. Green is a big step up from where he was last year, Matt, where he was outside the top 150 for the season. But of course, he was top 60 over the last 2 months, and we expect that. Yeah, this happens with shooting guards. We see it all the time, is that they struggle, they figure it out the last 2 months to a degree, and then they take steps forward and maintain at a solid level in year 2. And we saw it with Anthony Edwards, and I think we'll see a similar thing with Green. And then there's Vassell, who just gets the biggest opportunity bump with no DeJounte Murray. Him and Keldon Johnson are going to be taking a lot more shots. He was already top 100 after Derek White was traded last season, and this is about the area. But you probably don't need to grab Vassell here, Matt.
No, you don't. I think you can get him hopefully in that maybe 60, 70-ish range, but he's definitely got top 50 upside. Like you said with Jaylen Brown, really good roto game, but takes a little bit of a bump in head-to-head legs because he just doesn't give you that big boost in any one category. Yes, the points are good, but like you said, even across the board. And just be a little bit careful about Jalen Green as well, because, his strong threes bump him up, where, again, you can always get threes late, always get threes off the waiver wire. So, even across the board. So you're paying for, 24 points and maybe 3 threes a game here. But, a really nice tier if you need some scoring and, some steals as well from Devin Vassell.
The wild thing about this group is that, I might even have Vassell ahead of these guys. Probably wouldn't. I'd probably take Jaylen Brown because I know I can get Vassell later. But Vassell's ranked 146th on ESPN. Jalen Green's 150th at the moment, which is obvious insanity. But Vassell was 262nd on Yahoo a week ago, and now he's bumped back up to 95, where there's still value in that. So you just watch where you can grab him. You can probably get Vassell in round 6 or maybe round 7. I got him in a pick 90 in a draft I did today. So you can find him fall down a bit. Now, tier 6 is pretty empty. It's got one guy in it. It's Klay Thompson, who took a lot of shots, Matt, when he came back last season. He wasn't particularly efficient, but his usage was sky high. It was higher than Steph Curry's. We expect that he plays more games this season, but I still think he's going to sit majority back-to-backs, and that's going to bump the value down. I just don't think I'm interested in him. I just don't know what he does outside of hitting a lot of threes. The scoring is really nice. That's true. But will he maintain this sky-high usage that was higher than Steph Curry, or was that just a focus to get him back into action last season? I'm not certain about him in this area.
I'm definitely not certain either, and especially with, the season that Jordan Poole had last season, and they can put him out on the court a heap more and maybe, reduce Klay's minutes a little bit and games as well. So I'd be really shocked if Klay plays more than, probably 60 games this season. So right here, you're paying for elite threes when you don't need to. So I think you can use this spot of the draft a lot wiser. We're talking, if we compare this to maybe like your point guards and maybe, something similar, we're talking like maybe your Josh Giddey's or your Marcus Smarts, Jamal Murray, all that sort of range as well. So you can probably focus on the assists and the point guards in this range and get those threes later on in the draft.
There's a bunch of guys in tier 7, and I reckon I'd take a few of them ahead of Klay Thompson, to be honest. We've got Jordan Poole, Tyrese Maxey, Tyler Hero, and Collin Sexton. I am a little worried with Poole, who played majority of the season without Klay. Klay came back, Steph went out, and he was able to take control there as well. But in the games that they all played together, he didn't really get much cracking. And there is going to be times that those guys are out. I'm just not sure when. I know that Tyrese Maxey is going to play 35 a night every night. I know that Collin Sexton's probably going to play 33 to 34 minutes most nights, and Hero's going to play 32 a night, where I think Poole might go 27 and 32 and 25 and be a little bit all over the place. Maxey, people are going to say, is pretty low here, Matt. I'm just part of the reason he was able to maintain good value last season when Harden came is he hit 46% from three. And assists and rebounds dropped, and usage was like 18%, I think, in the minutes he shared with Harden. And I'm just not going to go into a season going, well, you know what? I expect him to shoot 46% from three, especially after shooting 30% as a rookie. That's unrealistic. Like, he could drop 10 percentage points in three-pointers, still be really good, but that drops probably 30 spots of value from losing all that volume because, again, we saw assists drop, we saw rebounds drop, we saw usage drop when he played with Harden, but he was able to keep value elevated by just hitting almost every three possible.
And the thing with these guys, like, I love one of my favorite things about our Basketball Monster website is you can see whether a player is providing a positive in a category or a negative in a category. With the projections, and Tyrese Maxey, his two positive categories are free throw percentage and threes, and then just slightly ahead in points. So again, it kind of feels like we're paying a premium here for three-pointers. Collin Sexton, I'm not as bullish about him as you are. I just feel that Utah might just ease him back in and give him rest and just be really careful with him. And I just want to go back and touch on, Jordan Poole and Klay Thompson. Would you, if they were both sitting there in, say the 70 or 80 range, would you prioritize Poole over Klay?
I guess it depends on what I'm looking on with my team, because I know Poole's going to get more assists, he's going to get more point guard reps, which can be really valuable. But if my team doesn't require those, or I don't need assists, then that extra 4 or 5 points a game that Klay scores becomes more valuable there. So I think in a lot of cases I would take Poole ahead of him, but that's going to be pretty context dependent.
Yeah, and Tyler Hero, probably doesn't have the name value. Like, could be a cheaper option than someone like CJ McCollum. Good scoring, good rebounds. But yeah, just need to cover the lack of steals elsewhere. But yeah, not a bad tier here if you're looking for a shooting guard option.
What do you think? A Hero, if he does start, I think it actually hurts him because in the past he has really struggled next to Jimmy Butler. It wasn't as much of an issue last season, but in the past it has been a concern that off the bench, great, starting, no good. So I'm a little worried about how that would pan out. Tier 8, got two players, and they're diametrically opposed players. They're both shooting guard eligible, but they're very different guys. One of them is Anthony Simons, who had a stretch of like top 20 value, but was also really bad for lots of the season. Speaking of the year, he was one of the worst fantasy options that you had no business being on a 12-team league for the first 3 months of the year. And then Lillard went down, and then McCollum was out, and then he put up huge numbers. And then he got hurt himself. And there's Jalen Suggs that's in this group as well. Let's start with Simons. He slides into the McCollum role. He doesn't, I don't think, have quite the same value as McCollum did in that role. He will have to be playing off ball. The Blazers have traded a terrible defensive backcourt for another terrible defensive backcourt. And again, the only time we've seen Simons have these big numbers is when it was literally clear out for Ant and let him do everything. And he's just not going to have that opportunity.
Yeah, and they've brought in Jeremy Grant, who needs some shots as well. So he's probably third in the pecking order, or maybe equal second.
I reckon he'd be there. I don't want Jeremy Grant taking shots. And hopefully the Blazers go, we saw you did in Detroit. Thanks. Your team was dreadful. Can you do what you did in Denver and OKC, where you actually were able to contribute to winning? Please don't take 20 shots a game. Because I hope that's what they do, and I hope Jeremy Grant doesn't come and go, I'm the man. My guy. Like, you contributed more to losing than almost anyone in the NBA. So I think Simons will be the number 2 guy there. But you're right. It is a concern.
But again, yeah, not a bad spot here for Simons. And then Jalen Suggs, I'm really, really keen on Jalen Suggs this season. We didn't get to see the best of him in his rookie season last year. Missed 20 games due the middle of the season due to a fractured thumb. And then when he came back, he was shooting like 36% from the field. But he can get some assists. He can get some steals. He can hit a three. Like, I just think
he can hit a three. I think he hit 27% of them last year.
Well, that should improve, Josh, especially if he's got a decent thumb this year.
He also had ankle surgery too, so we hope that all that stuff's fixed, yeah.
And then Banchero will help just take a little bit of load off there as well. But I just feel like Suggs can be a Marcus Smart type of player. And yeah, if he's falling outside the top 100, then
he is everywhere.
I'm definitely keen on Jalen Suggs this season.
No, I look at him in drafts like around 10, round 11, steals, assists, rebounds, some threes. Like, I've got him projected at 14, 4, and 5. if he averaged 17, 5, and 5 with 2 threes, I wouldn't, much like saying I wouldn't be shocked if Anthony Edwards was top 10. I wouldn't be shocked if Suggs was able to do that. I think he's already a top-level NBA defensive guard. The shooting is horrible, right? And maybe it doesn't turn around. It was really bad. I think there's going to be a level of improvement, but does it improve to below average? Does it improve to bad? Does it improve to very good? That's the differentiating factor. But I'm really interested to see what he can do. So, especially with Gary Harris out now to start the season, there is a pretty solid role there for him. Next, we're looking at, Matt, a bunch of guys outside the top 100. You might argue that Simons and Suggs. Well, Suggs is definitely outside the top 100, but these guys are definitely outside. You've got a couple of second-year guys, Bones Highland, Chris Duarte. We've got Norman Powell, Gary Trent, and DeAnthony Melton. Much like when we talked about Jamal Murray yesterday, people are really high on Bones because they think that Murray's going to just sit millions of minutes, and they think, well, Barton's gone and Morris is gone, so it's time for Bones. But as I will constantly preach caution, is that is true that Morris and Barton have gone, but Caldwell Pope is here, and Bruce Brown is here, and Jamal Murray is back. So it's not just like everyone's cleared out for Bones. We moved on from guys, but we also brought some other guys in. So Bones will play more. I think it will do better than last season, but there are a lot of people who are expecting 29 minutes a night and 17, 4 and 5, and then I'm not quite sure we're ready for that yet.
No, and I tend to agree. And then we move on to like Norman Powell and how's he going to get shots while Kawhi and Paul George are healthy, and they're just so deep. Gary Trent, a great steals and threes option. He was 17th overall in threes made and fourth in total steals.
Yep.
Like, wow, like incredible season. So he's a really good spot here. DeAnthony Melton's probably going to need an injury to Harden or Maxey to really see his value like max out. And Duarte, then, like I said, we've got Buddy Hield and Mathurin and just a few guys there on the wing. So that's a little bit of a messy situation. But, yeah, I mean, I'd be more than happy taking Gary Trent here and then, taking that flyer on Bones Highland as well.
Yeah, I'd probably take Trent here, depending on what I needed, of course, because he's going to absolutely torpedo your field goal percentage. Like, if he doesn't shoot 40%, don't be shocked. He's probably 41, that sort of guy, on a lot of volume. Do you think Duarte starts, or do you think they go with Hield and Mathurin?
I think they probably do start him just to ease Mathurin into it and bring him off the bench. But, I mean, yeah, we're still hearing trade rumours about the Pacers and Miles Turner and Buddy Hield and whatever. So, I mean, things could completely change in the next 5 weeks. But it's going to be an interesting training camp to watch.
It is one of those things we really need to pay attention to. We also need to pay attention to the bloke with the worst hair in the NBA. He's sitting here alone in tier 10. It is your mate, Matt Dillon Brooks, the man who's never met a shot he doesn't want to take. Probably the most annoying and destructive player I've seen offensively on an NBA court in recent years. I know people will push back. Man, he's the heart and soul of our team. Yeah, that's cool, but he just takes the ball away from better players. He will be out there, and in points leagues, he's a better player because, again, he's going to jack shots up. I worry about how Morant, Bane, and Brooks all fit together because they played 150 minutes combined last season, so we didn't really get to see it. And when we did see it, Desmond Bane was just relegated to a spot-up guy, and that's obviously not ideal for a team. Brooks has amazing advanced stats last season, so some of that is important to take context in. But for fantasy, he's always been a little bit limited because of just the horrendous shot selection.
Yeah, and the field goal was just a massive hit, and there'll be times when he gets on a bit of a scoring run and he might average 20 points a game and across a couple of weeks, and you think, yeah, this is really good, and then after that he'll just hit a wall and he'll become more of a liability to your team.
He definitely will be a liability in plenty of areas, but it's got to fit the right squad. And then lastly, tier 11, Matt, Kevin Huerter, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, Seth Curry. I think Huerter and KCP are definite starters. I think Seth will start, but there is the Joe Harris situation there in Brooklyn. But who would you say is the highest upside guy there?
To me, it's probably Kevin Huerter because we can see him handle the ball a little bit more. He can get some steals. He can do a little bit of everything. Whereas to me, Seth's pretty much threes. KCP is pretty much threes and some steals as well. But I wouldn't be drafting any of these three guys just in standard leagues, that is. Stream them through when you need some of the stats. And Kevin Huerter, does he start or he's probably like sixth man-ish?
No, I think he starts. I think it'll be Fox and Huerter with Monk and Mitchell off the bench, personally.
Yeah.
They traded a protected first-round pick for him. After they had signed Monk and after they had Mitchell on the roster, they went out and said, we actually want to get Herder on top of this. So that doesn't scream to me like we want him to come in and play 20 minutes. Like that, they deliberately went and got him after they'd done those other moves or after they'd gotten Monk in there. So I do, look, he won't be playing 35 minutes a night, but I do believe that he will be the starter. KCP will start, and Seth probably will as well. But you're right, they're probably not guys to take in the last round just because you want to take some hits or some chances on some higher upside players. So in guys like that, like we haven't included Will Barton in this mix. We haven't included Jordan Clarkson in this mix. I don't really know where he's going to end up. The guy I'd be interested in take a flyer on here is Benedict Mathurin, because I don't know. Now, my gut would tell me that he'll be outside the top 250 for the first 4 months of the season, as rookie shooting guards tend to be. Even if he's in there getting minutes and shots, I think he'll be actually quite bad for majority of the season, but he might not be. So I would take that upside on a player like him. I would even consider a Jaden Ivey, even though it's probably a 10% chance that he's better than Herder, KCP, and Curry. But that's what we want to do, Matt. In that last round, we want to say, well, can you top out at 120 or can you top out at 75? Yeah. And if it's only a 5% chance of topping out at 75, though, I'll take that 5% chance.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why, maybe someone like Horton Tucker, would, depending on what the Jazz do over the next 5 weeks, I still think that they'll, move on Conley and Clarkson and Bogdanovic before Christmas, and then he really comes into play. So maybe you can, draft him and sit on him for 2 or 3 weeks and see how it goes. And yeah, just completely more upside than those guys who we spoke about in that last tier.
Another guy that I reckon has some merit for discussion here is Tim Hardaway Jr. Just with the loss of Brunson, he might be able to be an 18-point per game scorer, which is really valuable. That might give you 3 threes, 18 points. Wouldn't do anything more than a last-round pick, and he was pretty bad before the injury last season. But it's possible that he gets a larger role and he's able to put in some interesting numbers. The other one is Josh Primo as well. We talked in the point guard show about maybe he starts over Trey Jones. So just take a flyer, see what happens. Quentin Grimes, Emmanuel Quickly, these sort of guys that if it doesn't work out in the first couple of weeks, you get rid of him. You say, see you later, and I'll grab someone else. But it's worth having that crack at the upside there. Matt, shooting guards is over. We'll be back to talk forwards at some point next week. So stay tuned for those. Matt, tell us where to find you.
What, my home address, or like what do you want?
I need to send Built Bars somewhere. So yeah, if Built Bars listen, they can send them out to your home address. No, on the social media, Matt.
On the social media. At S-Man Sports on Twitter. You can find all my work at basketballmonster.com. Articles, tiers are all there. Overall ranking tiers are up. Categorical scarcity will be up soon. So that's a fun one, which I love doing as well. A few live chats coming up. We'll do them later on in the month and then early in October before the season starts as well. So, give us a follow on Twitter and we'll talk forward soon.
Yep. Go and follow Matt. Go check out our stuff over on Basketball Monster. Thanks for coming on and chatting guards with me over these last 2 shows, Matt.
Anytime. Thank you.
And that'll do it for today's show. Don't forget to follow this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, and on the Odyssey app. If you are here on YouTube, thumb it up. Leave your comments down below. Guys, we are done here. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya.